The last is is that uh, the benefit is sound governmental finance. In the current economic integration, the European Economic and Monetary Union is the currency area with a unified central bank and a single currency. But the fiscal policy are still the scattered of, of the scattered in the hands of all the member countries. The single currency will inevitably have an impact on the physical affairs of individual member countries. First is the importance of the fiscal discipline. The sustainability of government budgets is a factor that the monetary policy have to consider. And in the long run, the sustained fiscal deficits will lead to gradually increase the scale of the government debts. And debt financing and rigid expenditures takes the large portion of the budget spending that becomes bigger and bigger. And that makes the government's budget hard to maintain. This kind of problem can only be solved in two ways. The first is the monetarization of the debt. The other are the government bankrupts. In the first case, the central bank has to give up the independence in order to save their own governments. In the second case, the central bank is loyal to its anti-inflation goal and doesn't lend a helping hand to the government, which would force the government to repudiate some or all its debt, which would mean a fiscal crisis or even political instability. Of course, in general, if a member state of the European Union has an excessive debt deficit, it will affect the independence of European Central Bank and other member states in the following three aspects. First is that the high indebted countries has to increase the pressure, has to ask his own central bank to increase the pressure on the monetary easing. So the high indebted country has to ask his own central bank to ease the monetary easing. That means the high debt country after highly after under the single currency reduce the monetary policy leeway. That implementation of the European Central Bank's monetary tightening policy will reduce the domestic demand on the one hand and make it slow the rate of economic growth or recession, reduce the tax revenue, and On the other hand, the high interest rates caused by the monetary tightening will increase the cost of debt repayment. And since the central bank's implementation of the policy unified enforced policy and ask them to ease their money base. That makes their central bank to be even if the central bank has independent of this pressure, its monetary construction has to it might cause the financial crisis and even the political turmoil. And that way, the central bank implements the independent monetary policy in the facts becomes a restriction. So the constructory policy can make the financial crisis and even the political turmoil, and that it becomes the real contrast or constraint to form the central bank's independent monetary policy. And when the capital markets predict that this central bank has to implement the current inflation policy to ease the financial difficulties, the interest rates, the risk premium can be increased in the interest rates. And meanwhile, the central bank has the credit in the anti-inflation has been adopted. This influence is in the long run. And when the country facing the second difficulty has some influence is when the country facing the physical difficulties, it will influence the whole Eurozone stability. After the start of the Eurozone's independence, the only country in the Eurozone has lost their independence in the monetary policy, and when a country cannot find their help from other way to survive their debt crisis or maintain the government operation, they have to announce they failed to repay the debt and even to exit the European economy and monetary union in order to monetarize their debt. And this is shaken public confidence. This shakes the public confidence in the European economy and monetary unions. And when the people in the countries issue the debt, grant different credit standards or credit grades, that a unified euro debt market will not occur, and segregated financial market is not a benefit to the European Union's integration, and it also causes the Central European Central Bank cannot operate their open market transactions. The last, finally, the financial difficulties of a country will increase the pressure on other members of the European economy and monetary union to rescue it. Such pressure, like the aforementioned pressure on the central bank, will cause a debt on the market, and at home it will lead to a higher market interest rate, which is not benefit to the development of trade and investments. And the country's lack of financial discipline can leave future trouble for the stability of the Eurozone and the Euro. It is precisely based on this consideration, starting with the Euro, that is the possibility of relaxing the national fiscal discipline. Unified markets will create more convenient options.